One of the big criticisms of ZBrush is the interface, and getting past that can be difficult. So when I'm training people, I quite often get them to amend their interface just to give them the main tools out here on the interface. So in this little video, I'm going to give you a quick overview of how I set it up for someone who's very, very new, and hopefully it might be useful for you to configure your own in a way that works just for you. So let's dive in and have a look at setting up the interface in ZBrush. So let's start at the very beginning when you launch ZBrush. So if you've launched it and you get this is called Lightbox, and basically there's a button up here that turns it on and off, and there's also comma on your keyboard will turn it on and off, and all that is a file manager. And you may pop in and out of that from time to time to get different projects, Z tools, alphas, all sorts of different things in there, but we don't need that. And then what you'll be faced with the interface is this. And the first thing that we want to do is to think about the size of the document. So it's not even filling our window, so that isn't helpful. So the first thing I always do is if we just go up to basically all the way up to document, and then we've got sizes in here, and it'll be whatever the default size is. So I always make this bigger than my screen. So if I've got a 2.5K screen, I'll say 3000, and I'll go something like 2,500 wide, and then resize it. It'll say resizing document is not an undoable operation. Would you like to do it? Then basically yes, I would. Now I know I've got an overscan, so my document is bigger than my interface now. And you can still see this gradient in the background, which some people do like, some people don't like. So to get rid of that gradient and just work with like a grey background, something like that. So first of all, just come along here and slide this to the colour that you want. So if I just go for like a medium grey, and then if you just come up to the top and basically have a look for where it says back. So you'll be in the document window, document menu, and where it says back, and just hit back. Sometimes for me it takes a couple of clicks, but if you hit back like that, that means the background is that grey colour, but the gradient hasn't gone. So go back to the same window and see where it says range, and turn that range off. If you go all the way up, you get a full gradient. All the way down, it's off. And that means now you've basically got a grey window to work in. And we can zoom in and out of that, which I'll cover in a minute. But at the moment now, we've got a grey background and a document size that's bigger than our window. So that's a great start for anyone. Now, along the way, you can save what you've done. So I do Control, Shift, and I, and it says master configuration file has been saved and will be restored every time you start ZBrush. So click OK to that. You also can come up here and you can say document, and then you can say save as startup document. So that's another good one to do. That means all of these are going to be permanent changes now. So let's move to the next bit, which is these sidebars. So if you see these arrows here and here, this is the open state, like so. And this is the closed, well, this is the open state and the closed state. Open state and closed state just by clicking on it. So that's basically, you're going to want both of them open most of the time. Everybody will do this differently, and it does depend what machinery that you're on. Now, this is a SenseLabs medium graphic tablet. If you're on a Cintiq or a large screen-based Wacom or a SenseLabs or any of the Huions or any of the other ones that make these things, you may want to configure this slightly differently. And the reason being, it's not so bad on a tablet like this in terms of where I move, because obviously I'm just moving it on the tablet here. If I'm having to move my hand because things are on a physical glass screen, then if you are left-handed, you want the main toolbar on the left. If you're right-handed, you want it on the right. Wherever your dominant hand is, that's where you want most of your tools. So I'm going to set this up as I do for a right-hander. Now I'm left-handed, but ignore that for now. And I'm going to put my toolbar here. And this is where most of our donkey work is done. All of the hard graft work is done from the tool menu. So how did I get it there in the first place? So let me just hit this little button here, and that gets rid of them completely. So I've got two completely empty sidebars at the moment. So what I want to do is go back up to where, up to the top where you've got all of these different words at the top. So all the way from alpha all the way to help are all of the different drop downs. Now as you work along them, as you come away, it comes off the screen as a drop down would, and we want them open for quite a few scenarios. So we don't want them closing down. So we put them on the side, and that means that they'll stay open when we need them. So let's work through the ones we need, but we'll start with the one I just told you, which is tool. So you open it, and there's a little circle at the top there, and you just hold down with your tablet stylus and just drag it and then drop it where you want it. So that means now on the sidebar we've got tool, and you can roll it open by clicking on the word. So open and closed on the word. Again, if you hit that little circle, you can basically pick it up and move it around. So you could move it to this side, or you could drag it into the window and it'll disappear. But we don't want that, we want to leave it there. And then if you hit the icon that it is, so this hammer icon that's been the same right for the last 20 odd years, close it and it's closed shut like that. So what we want to do now is work through all of the ones we use all the time, and we'll have them set up as a default on one side or another. So I'll show you how I do it, and you can adjust that over time. So let's work from the top. So we've got alpha. Well, that's a definite one that I want. That's one we use all the time. So I'm going to hit the little circle and drag it to the left, and then hit the word, and that closes it down. So we've got it there, open and closable whenever we want. Next one is brush, the powerhouse of ZBrush. So if we're not in tool, we're usually in brush. They're the two main ones that we use all the time. Color, not so worried about that. We've got a color panel here, and we can access it in a number of different ways. You could, for example, hit spacebar and it's there as well. So I tend to not need color out as a regular used thing. Document I don't use. Draw I don't use a lot. Obviously I do use these, but not a lot. Dynamics, I sometimes add it onto a sidebar if I'm doing a lot of dynamic work, but at the moment we don't need it. Edit, file, layer, don't need any of them. Light we do need. Well, I like to put light on the opposite side, so we'll put light over here with tool. Because it's not one we use a lot, but once we get to that time, lighting and rendering, I put them over this side. So we've gone light, macro we don't need, marker we don't need, that's legacy, it's quite an old thing, marker. Material we do need, and we'll put that, as you can see there, we'll put that with the alpha and the brush. So that's another powerful one. We've got movie, really quite an old one, and really just for turntables now, and basically showing off your work, so we don't need that. Picker we don't need at the moment. Preferences are always there and we don't need them. Render we will need at some point, so we're going to drop that on this side, close it down. And then the last few, stencil don't need, stroke we do need, we use that quite a lot. Put that out. And texture we've already talked about, so that one is well used a lot, so make sure you shut them down or you can get lost. So tool basically is where, you know, we've already got that out. It's the first one that we did, so that is over here already. Then transform is used but not regularly, so don't particularly need it out. Z plugin, Z script and help. So, but of those last three, I usually say Z plugin can be quite useful, certainly towards the end of projects. There's lots of scripts in there, so I tend to leave that out. Now, if you've done all of them, you'll find that most of the work that you want to do in ZBrush can get done. The day-to-day work that I do in ZBrush is done with all of those panels, and that's really all you need. So at that point, do another Control, Shift and I. Save the master configuration again. What you can also do is under Preferences, Config, you can say you can say Save the UI. So you could actually say, can I basically save a copy of the UI in here as well? So that means you can travel around with it, save it to your Dropbox or your Google Drive, or you can keep it on a drive, and you've got your setting with you wherever you want, which I find quite useful. So we've got all of the tools that we want out now, and we can open and close them as we need. If we're going to work on texture, for example, we would have that out. We want to work on stroke and change stroke. It's all there for you, and it stays open. Now, if you don't know much about the navigation in ZBrush, you won't know that these sidebars are dragged up and down by clicking in them with the stylus. Now, what you can do is have this scenario where it looks like there's nothing there. And what that's done is it's dragged its way to the top and gone out of the top. So just be a little bit careful if stuff's gone missing. And I'll also show you this, and a lot of people don't know this, that all these individual bars in here, if you can find a bit of grey space, you can move them along. So basically, if you hold control and slide left and right, this top bar can disappear completely. And that can get confusing sometimes because it looks like your entire interface has disappeared, which it hasn't. And that also means that we can do that down here as well. So it allows you to scroll and move things around, you know, as it works for you. So that's a really good one to remember. So it's control and then drag wherever you are. So we're now getting to the point where we can start thinking about adding things to our interface. So we need to load up a model. So let me just use, I'll just load something I worked on recently. Now, anything that we've loaded up appears here in your toolbar. So having your toolbar out straight away is a useful thing. I cover this in a lot of other lessons, but if you click on the large square at the top, that shows you all your different Z tools, as they're called. You've got Quick Pick, 3D meshes, and 2.5D meshes. You can pretty much ignore 2.5D brushes. They're very much a legacy item. So we're going to pick anything that we want from here, from 3D meshes. And we've got our Carnotaurus here, so click on it. Nothing appears because it's still not been drawn into the window. So let's drag it out slowly and stop. And this is the biggest lesson with ZBrush, the very, very biggest single thing that gets people confused. If at this point you do anything else other than what I'm about to tell you, you get this horrible repeating problem that happens all the time. So if you do that and you have made a mistake, you simply just clear this by doing Control and N, and that clears the screen. What you want to do is drag it out and stop, and then hit keyboard T or edit up here. So T will give you that, and it's now a live item when we drag it. Still doesn't really give us a lot of relevance to where it is in space or anything. So what we can do is on this little panel here, we've got the floor. So that's Shift and P, and you can now see a floor, which is really, really helpful as you're working because it gives you your up and down. It gives you, you know, you can really see that Y is green and up. Red is X, left and right, and Z. So it's very, very normal at this point, and you can see your creature or design or whatever in a 3D space. So I generally tell people to put the floor on straight away just to get a link to the world. Now, obviously this is a tutorial, this is a video about the interface, so I've had to use some models, so forgive the deviation there into some of the workflows. So now what we want to do is we want to add the buttons that we want to use all the time. And with anything in ZBrush, you can pretty much move buttons around and load them wherever you want. So what we want to do is if we're going to work on a model like this, we're going to want a lot of brushes. And to access your brushes, it's B on the keyboard, and then you can see them all there. And there's a huge amount of brushes to pick from. But if you just pick the ones I'm going to tell you now, you can then just learn from these and then move forward at a later stage. So the first thing we want is standard. So if you hit S, that'll filter it down to the S's, and you'll see that down here you've got a standard brush. And it's actually, the definition letter is T. So its standard brush would be B, S, T. And just to show you how that works, it's B for brush, S for standard, T or S for S's, and then T for standard. And that means in the brush menu up here, that's been loaded. Now there's some already loaded there. The big one here accesses that brush menu, which is B, or the little one is to call the one that we want to use. So any of these that you want to use, so the one we've just said is standard, you would click on it, and now you can now sculpt with that. And that would mean this, so you can sculpt on top of your model. But we want to use that quite a lot, and we don't want to keep remembering BST all the time. So what we want to do is drag that to a place on the menu where we can use it. So to allow that, you've got to go to Preferences, and then you need to go to Enable Customize. And now you've got the ability to drag anything around. So to drag that standard brush around, you just hold Alt and Control, and then pick it up and drag it and drop it. And I'm going to drag it to the bottom because I'm going to build a menu at the bottom. And this is how I build my training menu. This is the menu I get people to build when they're learning how to handle ZBrush in the first few weeks. So standard is the first one. Now there's some already out there, so I'll tell you the ones that I recommend and we'll go and get the others. So clay build-up, so it's Control and Alt, clay build-up and drop it. So we've got standard and clay build-up. We've got the next one that's already open there is move, which is obviously how we, if you click on move, you can see obviously it's how we move the model around on the model itself rather than moving the whole of the model in one go. Another one that's already out there is damp standard, so we can move that. And damp standard is a way that we, with a small brush, we can score into the surface. Whoops, I'm still on move there. So damp standard is where with a small brush, small intensity, we can basically draw score lines in the surface like this. If you hold Alt and invert it, you get this, which is like a great one for doing veins on the surface as well. And Control and Z will obviously undo those last few strokes because we don't want them. So I'll just keep undoing until they're gone. So damp standard is one I use all the time. So now smooth is there, but we don't use smooth because if you hold shift at any given point, that activates smooth anyway. So you don't need to have the smooth button now. It's completely built in. But what we do need is another one. So we'll go brush and we want flatten. So hit F and you'll see there's not many Fs. So we want to hit flatten, which will be A. And now it's appeared on the menu up here. And with Control and Alt, we can drag it down to the bottom. So that's a nice range there. So we've got standards, the standard brush, good for painting. Clay build-up, good for building up your clay. Moving stuff around, moving parts of your mesh around. Damp standard for scoring lines in. And now flatten will give you, basically it will flatten off certain parts of the mesh like this, for example. Don't want to do it at this stage, but trust me, it's one that we will use all the time. So that's given us our first basic brushes, and that's pulled out the brushes that really, that do help us as we're starting off. There's another set that I would add to those, but you can work out those with me as you follow these videos. I'll add more on to that section and say why I would add the rest, or I'll add it as I go along in this video. But they're now all set. Now what we need to do is make that permanent. So we will do what we did at the start, which is Control, Shift and I. So save the master configuration, and you can also save the interface again. And then you've got, these will all be saved as a permanent thing. So that's a really good start now. We've got some nice brushes to start with. That'll be there all the time. You can do it with anything actually. So if you go up here and you see the materials, you can see I've got quite a lot of materials in here. In fact, no, I haven't got that many loaded in at the moment. So, but if there was materials that I use all the time, what we could do is Control Alt and move them down here, for example. So I might say that I need this reflective yellow all the time out, and I just want to have that on there, and that'll stay permanently on your interface once we save it. So obviously don't just think that it's the brushes, so it can be all of the individual brushes, it can be the materials, any icon could be moved around. So that brings me on to the next bit, which is some of the tools that we use all the time. So let me go over and pick some of the ones that I use a lot. So I'll just change that material back to a grey because it's quite an aggressive orange. So one of the ones that I use a lot is called Dynamesh. And that's over here. If you come to the tool menu, open that, and then come down under geometry, and you'll see down here under geometry, you've got Dynamesh and ZBrush and loads of others that we will talk about. But two that I use a lot, Dynamesh and ZBrush, you have to keep switching between them to do certain functions within them. So it's good to, I like to have these out on the menu all the time. So the function to call Dynamesh is this big button here. So you can literally Control Alt and drag that up to the top and stick it at the top like that. That means you will always have your Dynamesh up there. Now there's a couple of settings that I like. So I like to have my Dynamesh resolution. So you can bring that up there. Now, if it won't let you go underneath it, you can put it at the side. Until you've got a large icon, it won't let you go underneath. So what we might want to do is drag something that that will give us a nice big icon. So something like, for example, that will drop this down now, And that means I can adjust this round a little bit with a bit more space. You don't actually need that, so you can get rid of it by dragging on there. And you can see that the interface closed back up then. So now we've got Dynamesh and we've got the resolution underneath it. So they're the two main ones that we would want from Dynamesh. There's lots of others in here. So you've got groups, polish, lots of other things you could use, but actually you only really need sometimes you just need Dynamesh and what's the resolution, and that gives you both of them there. So let's do the same then with ZRemesh it. So we'll drag Control Alt and drag that there. You could butt it up to it, or you could just leave it to the side like that. And with ZRemesher, you want target polygon count, and there you go. So now you've got your Dynamesh, which I'm activating it there now. So it's getting ready to Dynamesh this model, as you can see. And Dynamesh basically averages out the polygons across the surface of a model. And once it's on and called like that, you don't have to recall it. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'll just undo that, and I'll say, give me a resolution of 2048, and I'm tapping it in this time, hit enter, and then I Dynamesh, and now you get a much higher resolution of the Dynamesh. So that can be quite having those two there all the time means you can adjust them and use them, adjust them and use them, and they are there. Now ZRemesher is totally different, and what it does is it gives you a low polygon version with good topology. So we do use that a lot. Now with Dynamesh, once it's on, as I mentioned, you have to keep calling it by holding down Control and striking or tapping on the interface or within the document. But with ZRemesher, you don't. You just simply hit it once and it will calculate, and you'll get this little scroll bar here. Oh, sorry, orange progress bar. And this progress bar will just move along and will eventually come to the end here, and that means it's done that process that you've called for. So in this case, it's the ZRemesh. And the ZRemesh count below it says 5. So that means 5,000 polygons. So it's going to try and ZRemesh to 5,000 polygons for us. Now I'm going to end that because I don't want to ZRemesh this model, but that now has started to build up an interface, and what it means is you're not now constantly going in and looking for ZRemesher and looking for Dynamesh, and they're things that I literally use every time I'm sculpting. So having them there is brilliant. So let me just work through now. So I'll go a bit faster now, and I'll add you some of the things that I like to put up there. So one that I really do like is having mirror and weld, and they're in two different places, and this is quite annoying if you don't know where it is. So come down to Tool, go down to Deformation, and there's a mirror function there. So we can take that and we can pop that there. And what mirror does is, if I take the model now, you'll see a problem with the multi-resolution here, but it says it cannot be applied to a mesh with multiple resolutions. So what you can do is you can either freeze that, or you can delete those subdivision levels. So for now, we'll just delete them because we don't need them just for the moment. And if I mirror now, what you'll find is the model flips across. So it basically mirrors it across the x-axis. So we don't need to do that, but that means we've got it there. But what happens if you've got two pieces and you want to mirror them and weld them across this scene? Well, that's in a different place altogether. So if you come back up to Modify Topology, and then you've got it here. So you've got mirror and weld. So we drop that under there, and that means you've got those two very important ones in a really easy place to find. So having those there, so I'll just show you what happens when we do that one. So we'll just call it now. And you get this weird two-headed beast because it's mirrored it across this center line and it's welded it down the center. So that one's a good one to know. So you may want to mirror it first of all, and then you might want to mirror and weld. So that there's lots of reasons why you want the two of them together. So they're always a good one to have. Now with the multiple resolutions of a model, sometimes you've got a lot of high resolutions. I find I use this one quite a lot, which is delete lower. So I put that one around there as well. So that means you can delete any of your lower resolutions. Now what you want to do is be able to hide certain parts of it. So if I was to do a mask like this, for example, Or if you do it with a lasso, you can hold Control, tap in this top button here, and go to lasso, and then I could draw the lasso of where I want the mask. Now I might want to hide it for lots of reasons. So come down to visibility, and then you've got hide points, and that basically will just hide those points. Now Control Shift Tap brings them back, and a lot of the time you'll be doing this with keyboard shortcuts, but you might want to have that hide point out a lot, and I'll show you why in a moment. So Control and Alt and drag that out, and you might want a sequence here. So you want to, for example, you might want to hide the points like so. And then what you might want to do is you might want to delete those points. So if you come back out of that and you go to geometry and look down here, and you've got delete hidden. So I like to have them next. So you've got hide points, delete hidden, and then what you might want to do is close those holes. So you go back to modify topology and pull out close holes like so. So what you've got there is hide points, delete those hidden points, and then close that hole up. And that would give you this, which is basically now a completely sealed mesh. So having that sequence, hide points, delete hidden, close holes, from those different places is a good sequence to have in it, and it really starts to get you through some of these problems where you're digging through the menus all the time. So we're getting a nice little menu built up now of all the key functions. So let's just keep going. So at any given point, you might have multiple resolutions, and you might want to have a change of the resolution. But I like to have all high and all low available at the click of a button. So under Subtool here, you can just come down, and just underneath the main menu, you've got all low and all high. So I put all low and all high up there. And that means we can at any point go quickly, instantly to all the highs and all the lows without having to think any further than that. So that's quite a useful one. So I'm going to pick through a few more quicker ones now. So polygroups, I like to have auto polygroup out there, and I'll put it over here because we don't particularly, we haven't organized where we want them all yet on this one. So polygroups is quite useful. UV map is useful. So we want morph UV. So this is a bit of a random one, so we'll leave it out here. And morph UV with the bump, and that basically means that you can see the UV mapping that you may well have done. So an example would be, let me show you very quickly. So if we just use a simple cube like so, and we do make polymesh 3D so we can work on it. I've got Shift and F activated so I can see the wireframe. I'll come over here to UV master, and I'll just unwrap it for now. I won't do any of the complex things that come with that. So that's now got a set of UV coordinates. And now what will happen up here where you've got bump and morph UV, well, there's no bump because there's no, we don't want to show this in any kind of bumpy way. So we set that to 0 and we'll hit morph UV. And what that does is it opens up the UV mapping. Now that's a rubbish UV map. You wouldn't want it like that. But the idea is with the more complex characters now, you can see the UV. So having that out is a useful one as well. So again, just pick through a few more. Display properties, you might want to use double a lot, because basically double gives us the ability to see on the back side of a polygon. So let me just show you. So we'll mask a little bit. We'll use our interface that we built in already here. So we'll do hide points. Again, you can do that with keyboard shortcuts, but it's there. And if you look inside now, you can see inside it. If you don't have double activated, you don't see the back of the polygon. So that's a good one to have out all the time, so you don't need to go digging for that one. So you can, of course, carry on and keep doing this for ages, and you keep adding more and more. And you need to remember how to do this, because you want to adjust this every time you think of a new sequence or a new set of buttons that you're going to use a lot, and you want to put them on the interface. But this is how you end it when you've finished it. So go preferences and just turn off enable customize like so. So now it's locked, and then go back and do Control Shift I. That's master configuration saved. And also, I always recommend do save UI as well. So save your user interface there. You will have different interfaces for different jobs. So if you do more texturing, You might want to add more specific ones. If you do, you know, a lot of 3D printing, you might want to bring certain things out. There are loads and loads of ways to make this a better interface, but this is a good introduction of how you get past that first little bit of where is everything on the interface. So that, I think, is enough to give you a good idea of how to do it and how I do it. That alone, and just setting it up like that, is a massive help to someone who's new to ZBrush, because all of the main features to do your main sculpting are available to you just from the interface. And it gets you past that first few days where it's really, really difficult to be dancing in and out of these menus, which, you know, it can be one of the biggest frustrations for someone who's just starting with ZBrush. So if you're new to ZBrush and you're after, you know, something to help you get going like this, then obviously just follow along with this channel. I am finally putting my face-to-face course online. It's called ZBrush for the Rest of Us, and that's coming hopefully this summer. So follow along with the channel, and I'll just keep doing my lessons like this over the next few weeks, and add in anything that I use in from my 23 years, I think it is now, of ZBrush, that I think is useful for you as you're learning. I hope you're enjoying these videos, and if you are, please give us a thumbs up, because it does help us to get in front of other people who like this kind of content. And if you like the content, then please don't forget to subscribe, and we'll let you know when we upload new content every week.